Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Women's Eye podcast. I'm your host, Stacey Gualandi. Now, on the Women's Eye, we spotlight accomplished women who are leading by example and ultimately changing the world, like Inside Edition correspondent Alison Hall. Hi, Alison. How are
Hi,
you?
Stacey. So nice
Great
to
to
see
have you
you.
here. I feel like we might kind of be related because I once worked for Inside Edition years ago. So, maybe
We
it's
are.
a
It's a big
sisterhood.
family.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
I still have this.
I love
And
it.
and don't tell Charles I have this.
Oh, look at that. Oh my goodness. I need one of those at home.
It's like 20 logos ago,
Exactly. I love it.
well, I'm going to explain exactly why Alison is with us today in just a sec. But first, this episode is brought to you by Casco Financial Group in Phoenix. Casco president Catherine Scrivano started her business to help people create the financial strength to achieve their dreams. Now, national TV correspondent Alison Hall can be seen every day covering the latest news on Inside Edition. While reporting on a breast cancer risk assessment tool exactly 1 year ago, Alison was told she had breast cancer. She faced a very, very difficult decision, but now Alison explains how the actress, Olivia Munn, and the show she works for ultimately played a role in saving her life. So again, hi, Alison. Thank you so much for being here. I
Thank you so
really
much for having me.
no, I mean, I don't know if a year ago you would have thought you'd be here, sort of an advocate for women all across the world when it comes to being an advocate for yourself, when it comes to your health and breast cancer and everything else that plays into that, right?
No, absolutely not. I cover a lot of different stories at Inside Edition, and I definitely believed in this story. I thought, great, we're covering a story about breast cancer. That's so important. I'll take
I've
this
seen you
test.
river dance too, so I know there's all kinds
Exactly.
of
I do
stories.
all sorts of different things, and each story means a lot to me, some more than others, but I had no idea how much this story would end up meaning to me.
Well, for you to be here today too, I understand the grind that is Inside Edition in terms of the workload and just having to be everywhere and any given time. But when I said that you kind of credit the show for maybe saving your life, explain what I'm referencing there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's funny. My husband, we've been together for almost 10 years. He'll ask me often, so what's up today? What's going on at work? And I'm always like, I have no idea. He still asks me, and I have never basically known what I'm doing that day. I show up at work every day, and our executive producers tell me what I'm going to do. They have their early story meeting and they say, Allison, yesterday, you're going to go river dance. And this one day last April, it was Allison, Olivia Munn has come out saying she has breast cancer. She talked about how she found her breast cancer. You're going to do this story. You're going to head up the street and interview a breast cancer doctor. And so I thought, okay, let's do this. And I still think to this day just how serendipitous it was because, as you know, we have several different reporters. We have associate producers and producers who go out and do interviews. We have a big, amazing team at Inside Edition. The story could have gone to anyone
Anybody?
else. And the fact that they randomly perhaps chose me, thought it would be a good story for me, and I was available that day. I wasn't on vacation. I wasn't sick. It was me. And so I went up the street to interview this breast cancer doctor. And while I was there, our bosses called me and said, would you mind taking that test on camera? And I thought, you know what? Yeah, of course. My mom is a
Never thinking that
never thinking.
you'd
Exactly.
become, yeah, yeah.
No, my mom is a breast cancer survivor, so I've always been very focused on breast cancer. And I thought, oh, great. Like, you know what? I don't have time to get to the doctor. This will be a nice little way of making myself more aware of my risks. And then we'll go from there. Not expecting, I was 32 at the time, how serious the situation would become. So we do the test on
That is
air.
very young. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And I really thought, I'll start getting mammograms when I'm 40. I had talked to doctors earlier. I had had a few things with my breasts in my 20s. I had talked to doctors and said, should I be getting early mammograms? And they all had said, no, no, the little things. I had a biopsy. It turned out to be non-cancerous when I was 28. And they said, nope, that was just a fluke and it was non-cancerous. You're good till you're 40. So I just thought, I have at least 8 years. So when I took this risk assessment test, the results came back on camera and they told me that I had a 36% risk of having breast cancer in my lifetime. And while I was shocked to be receiving that information on camera and shocked that it actually meant that I should be taking this much more seriously than I already had been, I did think, okay, well, that's not a diagnosis. And in a way, that's like 74% chance that I don't get cancer. So maybe this isn't that bad.
Yeah.
That's at least what I thought initially. I thought,
And your
whoa,
reaction at that
okay.
time too is that you're like, wow, that's kind of high, right? I mean, it
Yeah.
was, yeah.
Yeah.
Because
And
any,
they
I was
had
going to
told
say
me
anything over 20%, is that the
exactly.
threshold? Okay.
Exactly. So, I mean, I go back, getting grades in school, a 36% would not have been a high score. But in terms of this test, they had told me before we did the test, anything over 20% was considered high. So when they told me that, and then I had in my mind, knowing, reporting on the story that Olivia Munn had shared that her breast cancer risk was 37%. When they told me that my score was 1% below hers, I thought, whoa, okay, well, that's a little bit too close for comfort. And then when the camera stopped rolling, the doctor pulled me aside and said, look, like you really need to pay attention to this.
Wow.
Come back and see me as a real patient, not just a reporter TV patient, and let's get you on a screening schedule. So I thought, okay, you know what? This is great. I will start getting early screenings. I was only 32, so because I wasn't ready for a mammogram yet, they were able to use that test to ask my insurance to get me mammograms and then to get me a breast MRI. And this amazing doctor said, basically every 6 months for the rest of your life, you'll be screened for breast
Tested.
cancer now that you have this high risk score. So I almost thought, like, you know what? Great.
Yeah.
It'll be like going to the dentist and I'll just get checked and it'll be fine. And of course, it's not going to happen anytime soon. So I went for my first breast MRI in October, and I remember it was Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And I remember
Oh,
thinking, well, this is sort of ironic. And when I was laying there, staying still, face down in the MRI machine, it's not the most comfortable place to be. I did think, it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month. I'm getting a breast MRI. It was almost like I had this feeling like, is this going to turn into something?
something. Oh, and you weren't necessarily doing that the breast MRI as a story, right? This was just at
No,
that
yeah.
time
So
just
now at this
personal.
point, this was all private. And of course, my reporter brain did think, like, should I be pitching this as a story, like follow me along? But at that point, it was becoming a little too personal. I was like, no, I need to focus
Yes.
on me. I already
Right.
put my personal health information on TV, and I'm going to go to these appointments and focus on myself. I think I put on Instagram, I put a photo up and said, getting my first breast MRI, just sort of a PSA. Make sure you make your appointments, get your mammograms, get your MRIs if you qualify, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, I had no idea that that picture would end up being like the picture from basically my diagnosis, which is so crazy. But yeah, it ended up being, I was dealing with this privately. So the same day that I had my breast MRI, I went back to work and they called me and said, we found two spots and we need you to come back in for biopsies. And
What
I
went through your head? Because I know that there was, I think you even wrote on a post, roller coaster ride of fear, anxiety, dread, and gratitude, which is,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So at first, the first few weeks when I was waiting for the biopsy and for the biopsy results, it was mostly just fear and anxiety. It was a really unpleasant few weeks with not a lot of sleep. And then I got the diagnosis that the one of the biopsies had come back cancerous.
Mhm.
Thankfully, that it was DCIS, which is the earliest stage of breast cancer possible.
Which is stage
Stage
0, right?
zero, exactly. So it means
Yeah.
that there's cancer in the breast, but it hasn't left the milk ducts yet. The one that I had a high likelihood of leaving the milk ducts and turning into an invasive cancer. So the fact that we caught it at this stage, I instantly was so, so, so grateful. And I thought back to 6 months before reporting on this story, being in that office with the cameras rolling, meeting this doctor, and I thought about Olivia Munn and thought, oh my goodness, like if I had not done that story, if she had not told her story, I wouldn't have had this diagnosis for years.
Yeah. I mean, you would have kept going because because I think even a mammogram, did you have a mammogram around within
Yeah.
that 6 months too? And
Yeah.
that was
So,
saying everything's okay,
yeah,
and
exactly.
yeah, so
Exactly.
that's got to be, it's got to be, yeah. So, I mean, I do, I feel for what you must have been going through, but I think it was your husband who said that this is like the best bad news or something like that, but,
Exactly. Yeah,
because then you have to then go, okay, here's my new normal. Now what does, because then you had a very difficult decision to make at that point
exactly.
about what do you do at that point. So,
Yeah.
I haven't really said,
Yeah.
but what was, yeah, what was your ultimate decision to make when you got that
Yeah. So
diagnosis?
I ultimately decided to get a double mastectomy. So I had the breast cancer in, or I had breast cancer in the right breast.
Hmm.
And I decided to do a mastectomy of both of them. So basically considered treating the right and preventative for the left and preventative for the rest of the left.
Yeah.
And there were so many factors that went into the decision making over a number of days. I had pros and cons lists, and I would just write at any surface that I had, like, okay, I could do this and I could do that. And oh, and it was like almost a spider web of if I do a lumpectomy, then I'll need radiation, and then I'll need hormone therapy, and then that will impact my fertility, and then there will be this, and then there will be that. But if I do a mastectomy, it means I can't breastfeed. And there are all of these things. Every decision that I was faced with has really big consequences. And so weighing the pros and cons and what felt right to me was a very hard and thorough process, but ultimately I decided to do the double mastectomy, and I am so glad that I did. I feel just a sense of peace now, knowing that my risk for future breast cancer is below 3%,
It's
which is just
amazing.
incredible.
Yeah. Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Um, but for you too, I mean, it had become extremely personal. That decision to also share your story, was that an easy decision make? Because your stories, both obviously for Inside Edition, CBS This Morning's, Drew Barrymore, I mean, you've been out there very publicly and very, very strong, brave. I mean,
Yeah.
I watch this and I go, how she's amazing. So I'm just curious how that decision was made to want to share what you were going through
Yeah.
before,
I
during, and after.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
I knew pretty quickly that I wanted to share it. Basically as soon as I was diagnosed, because the way that I was diagnosed was a direct result of Olivia Munn sharing her story and a direct result of Inside Edition then covering that story. And I even thought of all of the women who might have been watching Inside Edition and learning about Olivia Munn's diagnosis and then going and taking the breast cancer risk assessment test.
Yep.
And knowing that I was one of those people that benefited in real time from a story that we told and from her sharing her personal story so bravely, I knew instantly that if I could help one other person, even just go and take the test or go get a mammogram or a screening test in any way, no
Mm-hmm.
matter the result, I knew that I wanted to be a part of that, just as that had happened for me. But I will say it was not an easy decision to make.
I know, yeah.
Even though I knew it was the right thing to do in my heart, I was diagnosed at the end of October,
Mm-hmm.
and I shared with work very quickly, because I mean, I had lots of doctor's appointments and lots of tears, and I needed sort of some time and some grace, and they gave all of that to me, and they were wonderful. And I also shared with them that I would want to tell my story at some point, but that I needed time. So as I was making my decision and figuring out the schedule and what I was going to do, I had my surgery was in January and I told my story publicly in January.
Yep.
I basically sat with it in my own sort of cocoon of my husband and best friends and my amazing family for about 2 months and just processed it completely alone without the opinions or support, as amazing as it has been, but of anyone except for my close unit. And
Yep.
I think that that was really important for
You don't
me.
want like all the noise and people telling you and like even going on Google and yeah, you don't need
Exactly.
all of that. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. That early stage, you really, figuring this whole cancer journey out, you really, for me, I really needed to just look inward. I even noticed if I would be telling family or friends and they would say something, I would go, you would sort of read into someone's comments or somebody would have an opinion. And I really just needed to go, nope, like this is my experience and I need to feel this myself, as wonderful as it is to have support of others. But it made me ready then to when I was going to tell my story in January, I was just a lot more equipped to handle
Yep.
all of the public reaction, which it has gone, it's
I know
just
you
been
say
more
like one
meaningful.
person, if you affect one person, I have a feeling you have influenced or inspired countless women, right? I mean, the feedback must have been, and it continues to be tremendous, I would imagine.
Yeah, it really, really has. And I really hoped that I would, help maybe one person. What I didn't realize is that I would connect with so many women who have felt less alone in their journeys. I didn't really realize that I would end up connecting with so many women who have breast cancer right now, or who had breast cancer, or women who are previvors, they're called, who get preventative mastectomies before breast cancer. Maybe
Yeah.
they have a breast
I've
cancer
never heard that.
gene.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really cool and amazing, empowering concept of women who maybe have the breast cancer gene that makes it a very high likelihood, for some of them over 80% chance that they will develop breast cancer, or have a
Wow.
very strong family history. They'll get preventative mastectomies before they ever develop breast cancer to protect themselves. And I have just connected with so many women across the board, and it's been so helpful to me.
Yeah.
And I've
Yeah.
heard from them that it's so helpful for them to see someone out speaking about it, because it is such a personal, at times lonely experience, no matter the incredible amount of support that you have.
Well, I got to say too, and you're clearly a very dedicated reporter who loves what you do,
I
for a
do.
living, because I think you went back to work within a month,
I did.
didn't you? Yes. But I did see that where you said, I was ready and it's kind of like ready to tackle the world and get right back there. But how are you feeling now? Because we're about 2 months out, but you
Yeah.
feeling
Yeah.
good and
I
yeah.
I just looked at the calendar. I didn't even realize we're almost exactly 2 months out, just over. And I feel amazing. I wish that I could go back and tell my terrified,
Oh,
sleepless November, December self where I would be on March 18th, or, today,
yes.
just how good that I would feel, and that I would be back at work, and that I would be even working out again and being social, and that I would be cancer free. It has all been, thankfully, a really smooth process for me. That's not the case for everyone.
Yeah.
There can be lots of different complications that pop up, or I'm very lucky that the cancer that they spotted on the MRI and that they biopsied was the only cancer I had. They didn't find anything else while they were in there. So thankfully, everything has worked really well for me, and I'm just so, so grateful for that.
Yeah. I mean, for you too. Yeah. I mean, is it because I think you posted too recently that it's like, like how do I kind of, my life is different now because physically you're slightly different. So you're
Yeah.
kind of, how do I adjust to that? Do you feel like you've gotten some comfort or some adjustment from that, from how you were feeling maybe a week or 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, yeah, this whole process has been a roller coaster, to overuse that phrase so much, but it really is. It depends on the day, to be honest, or
Yeah.
the week, and it depends on how you're feeling and maybe how you're sleeping. And um, when I had the cancer diagnosis and I was living in a body that I knew at that point had cancer, even though it was early, that's a really scary feeling. And so to get the mastectomy and to get rid of it, to me, was the right decision. But I didn't necessarily think too much about what my new body would look like or how I would feel about it. I knew that that would be a process, but I knew that that was something that I would deal with then. So
Yeah.
now that I'm through those really hard parts of making the decision and having the surgery and then having all of the physical recovery aspects, some of the emotional side effects are now setting in where I have more time and bandwidth. I'm
Yeah.
not thinking just about the next appointment or thinking about the surgery. My mind has space to be anxious about other things.
I know. It's like
But
deadlines,
exactly,
I got to write
exactly.
that script.
Which
Yeah.
honestly is something that I'm grateful for. And so, but yeah, with that, I have been able to connect with so many women who have gone through this or something similar. And it is comforting to know that I'm not alone in this and
Yeah.
that the physical changes that your body goes through with all of this are still important. And especially as a woman, that's something that we put a lot of emphasis on for, and the world puts a lot of emphasis on for our whole lives almost.
Yeah.
And so just
Now you got
adjusting.
supermodel body, right?
Well,
I
that's the hope.
But it's interesting too because you have watching, like I said, watching you on television and just your reports and just being so, I keep saying brave, strong. You're empowered. But you've had such an amazing attitude. So I wonder if, how much is that play a role in all this? And I'm going to, you're a glamour girl, but I'm going to call you glimmer girl because you talk about these little glimmers. And I think that especially nowadays, that's a really great way to look at life and get through this thing we call life, So
Yeah.
how much has your attitude really helped you through this too?
I think it's really helped. And yeah, that's something that I started doing a while ago, way before cancer was ever part of my life, where it actually started where coming back to work from the pandemic, I was working from home or I would be taking company cars to and from the office when I was in the office during the pandemic, and I started having to take the subway again. And I was really unhappy about it. And so I started taking the subway, and instead of being a grumpy commuter going, oh, I hate the subway and look at this and look at that, I would say to myself, I have to find one thing that is positive or cute or funny or a glimmer, like something joyful that happens on the subway every single day.
I
And so I
love
started
that.
looking around and I developed this practice that started on the subway because if you can find something joyful or wonderful on the subway, you can find it anywhere. The New York City subway. And that really just became part of my life. And so then once I started going through this particular very hard circumstance, I continued employing that same tactic. And so even going through this whole process, all of the doctor's appointments and the hospital visits and the various painful things that I had to endure, I would say to myself, okay, find one thing to focus on that is positive. So maybe it was an incredible nurse who was holding my hand and like stroking it as I was getting this painful breast biopsy. Maybe it was the smile and friendly way that the intake person treated me. Maybe it was my doctor playing music while I was walking into the operating room. There's all these little things that I could focus on that reminded me that even though things can be very hard, there's also always joy and beauty and laughter, and there's a lot more good than there is bad.
And right, because I think I'm quoting you because I think you said that you always believe there's something to spark joy out there, but
Yeah.
also, um, I'm quoting Allison that pain and beauty can coexist.
Yeah.
I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. And is that kind of what you encourage other people who might be seeing and hearing your story for the first time, but also to not to live in fear? Is that all? Is that kind of the
Yeah.
advice you would give?
Yeah, I think so. And I also just think, and maybe it's coupled with I think it's Brene Brown who says this a lot. You can do hard things. I think that that is the message that I also really have taken away from this. Um, a lot of people have called me brave and so strong, and that's so wonderful. And I do believe now that I am, but it's not. I think maybe sometimes we think of being brave as something that is absent of fear.
Yeah.
And the reality is I was absolutely terrified for months, but I did the scary thing anyways. And along the way, I looked for joy and I looked for those glimmers, and I found strength within myself in order to go through with the hard thing. And that is really brave. And I think that anybody can do that.
Yeah, I think so too. Because it's a mindset, but I think too, just the influence. Yeah, like I said, you're changing the world. You know, I mean, I think that's really, really the key. And I guess for you, is there one thing that you have learned about yourself that you just never thought of before?
Yeah. I don't know. I think, to be honest, I maybe did know this deep down, because I have, everybody has had a journey of varied experiences in their lives, but I think it's really highlighted for me that no matter what I go through, no matter how hard things are, I have the ability to stay true to myself
Yep.
and move through really difficult situations in a way that makes me really proud of myself. And that's something I think to celebrate and to know for the future, because hopefully I have a very long life. Lots of different things are going to happen in my life. And knowing that I have this power to navigate these situations just gives me maybe some more confidence.
I think so. Well, and also too, I mean, there's definite a connection between you and Olivia Munn. Maybe do you think the two of you would like write a book together or something?
Oh, I don't
Just
know
an
about
idea.
that, but yeah, maybe. There you go. But
But yeah,
I
I don't know
love
if that
her.
is something that down the line maybe you'd write a book about all this too, and your
Yeah.
adventures as a reporter for sure.
Yeah,
So
yeah, there's definitely, I know I do need to start writing them down. I'm sure you remember this, but sometimes I'm like, I don't even remember what I did yesterday because your days just fly by and you do all
I
these different
know. There
things.
was a time when I could remember every single story that I did. I kept a list, and then now I see people and I go, "Wait, did I interviewed that person?"
Exactly,
It's like, no, wait,
exactly.
the president? Really?
Exactly.
So,
Taking
but
photos and Instagram really
no,
helps me. I'll go back and go, oh
yes.
yeah.
So that's how long ago it was for me. Didn't have we weren't allowed to take photos with celebrities back then.
Yeah.
So well, listen, Allison, thank you so much for your time, which I know is extremely valuable, and hopefully you have the rest of the night just to relax. But I really appreciate
Thank
you coming
you.
on and really sharing your story, and just being a positive influence on so many people's lives. So I
Thank you. This
thank
was so
you.
wonderful.
Yay! So all right. So if you want to learn more about Allison and I'm sure you will continue to inspire others too, but to learn more about your breast cancer story, just visit thewomenseye.com and perhaps read the book she will write someday. I keep pushing that. And speaking of books, of course, just check out our books, 20 Women Change Makers. Just go wherever you buy books and changemakersbook.com, and 20 Women Storytellers. You know, our next edition, we'll put you in here, Allison, at womenstorytellersbook.com. Now, don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter and YouTube channel. And again, thank you, Allison. I really appreciate it. And say hi to the gang for me.
I will. Thank you so much, Stacey.
Thank you. And thanks so much for joining me today. I'm Stacey Gualandi. We hope you'll meet us back here again soon on the Women's Eye podcast. Remember, it's the world as we see it.